y'all, it's Andrea with Sucs For You in Houston, Texas, and this video is about water propagation and water therapy for your succulents. And first off, water therapy is used when you have a plant that has roots already, but it's, struggling, it's not staying properly hydrated, or like in this case, these guys were in the ground and it was really hot last summer and they just started to shrivel and crinkle up, and so I dug them up, let the roots dry out for a couple of days, and then started using this water therapy method. And all it is take your container. I like to use like expanded shale because it helps support the plant, and the roots go down into the shale, and then you just fill the water up to right about here, and that way there's less risk of rot setting in at the base of the plant. Same thing here, I'm just not using the shale. This Orthia had kind of been forgotten about, neglected, and I just decided, let's just go ahead and get it pumped back up again. And so here you can see that the water line is right here, but the roots are up a little bit higher than that. And that leads me to a really common question, is question of mine too. If succulents are so easily overwatered, then how can they survive in water, whether you're doing a water propagation or water therapy? And that comes down to you're using a soilless method, so there's no bacteria involved, which typically is the cause of like root rot and stem rot. It's not necessarily from overwatering. It's because the conditions around the roots are funky, and something happens so that bacteria can get inside the plant and make it sick. So, and in this situation, you can see there's air around the roots here, and then when you're using something like expanded shale, again, that's a porous material, so that does like help contain some oxygen down in there. And then changing your water fairly regularly also helps get some oxygen back down into the water that you're using. So there's a few other methods, but if you look at like hydroponics, the way that they have these little air stones or air bubblers, there's all kinds of different things they use to help continuously provide oxygen to the roots of those plants. So as long as they have oxygen, and as long as the medium is clean, it doesn't have to be sterile, of course, but that might even be better if you can manage that. But just change the water out. And lastly, you don't want to leave them in there for too long, because it does just kind of get like, even if you're changing the water, the roots themselves, kind of eventually are going to need to be back in a more oxygen-rich environment. So water propagation is when you have a leaf or a cutting and it doesn't have any roots on it yet, and you're either worried that it won't put out roots fast enough for the plant itself to survive, or maybe it's it's like a hot time of the year or something like that, and things just aren't growing as quickly. And that's what happened with this guy. This had a whole other section to it that I cut because it was just like all wonky. And this is the Senecio crassissimus lavender scallops. And so right here, I took a cutting, let it dry. It was not putting out roots. It was in the middle of the summertime, really hot. And so I water propagated the cutting from there, and it took a couple of weeks before it even started to root. I was wondering if anything was ever going to happen, but eventually it did, and put on a nice bunch of healthy roots. And then I went and did the same thing with this guy, and yeah, it's doing really well. We'll talk about transitioning from water to soil in a minute. First, I want to discuss when to use this method and when you probably shouldn't. We'll start with when you shouldn't. Somebody had asked on our YouTube community page after I posted about, I'm going to be making this video, if you guys have any questions. They had asked if they could propagate. It was more of like a columnar cactus, and that would have been let's see, this guy. So say something like this, serious, we wanted to chop the top off and propagate it and make a new plant. They asked if water was a good idea for something like this, and I said no, I don't think so. There are certain times you want to let the plant you know, struggle a little bit so it does put out its own roots, put out its own soil roots. Because if it's putting out water roots right away, and that's its first root system, those roots are eventually going to die off, and or most of them at least, and you know, it'll still have to like expend energy to create like soil roots. So might as well just, you know, take it, do it at the right time of year when it's in its growing season, and let it dry up really well, and just, you know, go the old school route, just put it in dirt and wait. So for larger plants or plants with like a larger cut area, I definitely suggest that you just be patient and let that plant put out soil roots, even if it's just a few. And then at that point, if you're nervous, or you just, the plant itself is struggling, you can go ahead and pop it in some water and do some water therapy. So like I said, it can take a long time for the roots to start growing, especially on cuttings. But after that point, you know, I think once they start growing, they really start growing. So just be patient. And then once there's a decent amount of roots on there, they don't need to be all long and crazy. You can transfer it over to a container with soil, and then what I like to do is water it a little bit more frequently. Just, you know, letting the soil dry out is fine. Because what's happening is you've got your water roots in there, right? And water roots are different from soil roots because soil roots actually go in search of water, right? So you have, let's say, here's your dirt, here's your root, here's your soil. And when you water, the soil isn't always consistently wet, especially in nature. It may be over here, there may be a little patch of water over here, and it's a little more moist over here. So the roots are going straight down, and then they start to branch off, and that's called hydrotropism, which is the roots are actually seeking out, you know, moisture in the soil. That doesn't happen in water, right? Because it's just constantly wet. So what's going to happen is the water roots are going to be replaced by new soil roots, and in that process, I do, like I was saying, I do like to kind of like water a bit more frequently, just so as long as it's looking perky, but then you also don't want to overwater it. I know this is helping so much, but you know, use your intuition and watch the plant. This guy lost a couple of lower leaves after, you know, all of that, after being cut and put in water and then repotted, and you know, that's fine. It's not gonna go perfectly every time, and totally normal to lose a couple of lower leaves in the process. I've had a lot of luck with rooting cuttings in water, like with some aeoniums did really well. Of course, the senecio here, and the string of dolphins. I'm saying string of dolphins because it's like poking me right now. Some aloe vera, another aloe hybrid, I believe it was like Asteria. It was variegated and had a lot of yellow in it, and it was definitely struggling. Actually, I left it out in the cold one winter, and it was almost a goner. But I used the water therapy to help get some more roots going on it. And one thing you'll need to be prepared for is when you do take a cutting. Let's use this Crassula, this jade as an example. This cut in is going to have to be super duper dry, so it's going to take maybe 10 days or more before it's going to be healed over enough to put in water. So be sure that your plant is well hydrated. Water it a couple of days ahead of time so the plant has time to uptake that water and distribute it through its system. And then at that point, all you have to do is take a container. You don't want the tip of the plant touching the glass at the bottom or whatever you're using. It does need to be elevated. That's why I do like to use some kind of a drainage materials. And you just, you know, stick it down in there, fill the water up. You don't have to fill it up to cover the rocks. You can just fill it up about halfway, and I already have some water in here. See how it's kind of flopping over. Tuck it down in the rocks a little bit better, and then it will stand up. Okay. And kind of needs the same light as you would give them if they're fully rooted and potted up. And I would say anywhere between a week to 3 weeks, this guy should have enough roots established to be able to move it over to the dirt. I think this senecio took longer because it was a larger cutting, so it may take more time for bigger plants to put out roots than like a smaller cutting like that little jade dude. Moving on to water propagating leaves, succulent leaves, same thing goes. You want to make sure that plant is well hydrated, and you want to make sure that that you remove the tip is fully healed over. And I actually like to use, similar method as with the water therapy with the rocks. I just want to take a shallow container, put the drainage materials in, right, up to the top, and then put your leaves on. And then when you water it, you don't want to cover the rocks all the way with water. You want to leave the top of it just above the water level. And then when you put your leaves on, it keeps them raised up out of the water, and they'll start putting out little roots down in there. And we're already starting to see some action down here. This is awesome. This was only from like 3 days ago, so pretty cool. Talking about cuttings again, if you're checking on your cutting and you're looking at the stem and it starts to look off, it starts to look translucent, or it's turning like a darker brown, there's a chance that some rot is setting in. And at that point, what you can do is just remove it, cut that portion off, let it callus over, and try again. Or you just may want to give it another go at putting out roots in the soil. And you want to cut it, let it callus over really well, and don't water it until there are signs of roots. Okay, finally, there's a lot of really good questions that were on the community page, and I think I've answered most of them except for this one. Elizabeth Franco asked, would you recommend doing this in the wintertime with a succulent that's dormant? And the answer is nope, because when a plant is in its dormancy, everything about it slows down. It's slowing its growth. It doesn't need as much water. As far as it transpiring, like the excess water, that's not happening at full speed, basically. And so it's definitely best to attempt this during the growing seasons. And you can try it indoors year round, but there's still plants that, even though maybe it's warm or the temperature's controlled, or have mild winters, they still have a natural dormancy period during winter. And the same goes for summer dormant plants. And it's probably not as big of an issue with heat dormant plants if you're able to bring them indoors and give them a break from the heat. Well, I think that about covers it. And we talked about water therapy, when to use it, the difference between water therapy and water propagation. And if you have any other questions, things that I missed, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll definitely reply as soon as I can. And be sure check out my website, sucsforyou.com. We got a lot more information over there. And we have the succulent manual, ebook, and online membership version. And really hope this helped. Thanks for watching, guys.